So Lakanal, as a building, was constructed in the late 1950s. Originally constructed under the auspices of the Metropolitan Borough of Camberwell, so it was subject to the London Building Acts of 1930-1939. It was considered a state-of-the-art building when it was built. Actually featured in the Architect's Journal and considered to be one of the most successful applications of fire safety knowledge at the time of its construction. That being said, during the course of its life, it underwent a number of refurbishments, as is the norm for buildings of this sort of age and type. Most notably, a refurbishment in the 1980s to introduce a new central heating system resulted in the introduction of suspended ceilings in the corridors that you can see here, which I'll come on to later. Some security doors were introduced in the 1990s. These had implications for ventilation of the building, which again I'll come on to in a bit. And then finally, a lot of talk about the incident that occurred was around the major refurbishment that occurred in 2006-2007. And the building was a social housing block, so government owned, and majority of the tenants were social housing tenants, with a few leasehold tenants also in the property. The building had a total of 16 stories, of which there were 14 accommodation stories, an undercroft and a plant level. Access was via corridors on odd-numbered floors. I'm going to refer to flats throughout this presentation, but actually there were two-storey maisonettes. So you had corridors on every other floor providing access to one floor of the maisonette, and escape balconies on the other floor of the maisonette providing emergency egress. And all of that fed back into a single staircase which served the building, and a couple of lifts, only one of which was working at the time of the fire as it was undergoing repair, refurbishment work, routine stuff, but it did have implications for the course of the incident. And as I mentioned already, in terms of the installation of security doors, the building was cross-ventilated. Cross-ventilation was something which was commonplace at the time of Lakanal's construction. It basically meant that you introduced large open vents in the common spaces at the ends of corridors, the idea being that air movements around the building, wind and so on, would provide smoke clearance. You didn't go with compartmentation, you hoped that, well, the assumption was that there would be so much fresh air moving around the building that any smoke produced by a fire would be overwhelmed by the fresh air, and therefore you maintain a safe means of escape. That fell out of favour, I think, during the 70s and 80s as a result of some work that BRE did. And so it's something that's no longer favoured, but the UK regulatory framework being what it is, you do have the option of maintaining pre-existing fire safety measures, even if they've fallen out of modifications to guidance. The ground floor of Lakanal with an undercroft that housed a boiler house at one end and some storage areas at the other, and here you can see the base of the single staircase to the building. The base of the single staircase, incidentally, was open to the elements. There were no doors at the base of the staircase. There were, however, doors that sealed it off from the lobbies, and indeed there was no opening at the top. So you had a vertical shaft, open at the base, and ostensibly closed at all other floors in the building. Although the absence of smoke seals around doors did have implications again for smoke.
6 people died in the fire at Lakanal House, 5 in the bathroom of flat 81 and 1 in the living area of flat 79. Between January and March this year, the jury was called to listen to the evidence and to determine the circumstances of the deaths of those 6 people. The jury sat through nearly 12 weeks of evidence, identified a number of factors that contributed to the deaths, and then presented their written findings. The coroner determined from these findings, under Rule 43, that there were 3 organisations that had the power to take action to prevent the occurrence of or continuation of such circumstances, or to eliminate or reduce the risk of death created by such circumstances. This presentation looks at the recommendations made to the London Fire Brigade. The coroner also acknowledged that a number of changes had been made by the London Fire Brigade. Other than that, the coroner made 5 recommendations where she did make comment. These related to the use of incident commanders, comments around brigade control, communications, general familiarisation visits, and home fire safety visits pursuant to the 72D of the Fire and Rescue Services Act, and public awareness of fire safety. There are some key times that may help in understanding both the difficulties the fire crews were faced with and why the jury may have seen these as important in reaching their conclusions. They're not all the key or important times, but ones I've selected to set the scene. We've heard that the first call was made at 16:19 hours to a fire in flat 65. 2 minutes later, the occupant of flat 79, Catherine Hickman, made her call to brigade control. 16:24, time of arrival of the first appliance. 16:25, 6 minutes after the first call, flashover in flat 65. 16:30, bridgehead was established on the 7th floor. At the same time, fire entered flat 79. 16:35, firefighters reach flat 65. 16:40, 21 minutes after the first call, was possibly the last opportunity that Catherine Hickman had to escape. 16:47, fire was seen developing in flat 53 on the 7th floor and flat 37 on the 5th floor. 16:49, 30 minutes after the first call, the last sounds were heard from Catherine Hickman. 16:50, the bridgehead was compromised and eventually relocated to the ground floor. Conditions at that time also, conditions in the upper floor of flat 79 were no longer survivable. 17:15 was the last opportunity for occupants of flat 81 to escape using the balcony on the east side of the building. 17:19, 60 minutes after the first call, the fourth incident commander took over. 18:20, 121 minutes after the first call, the deceased in flat 81 were located. 20:51, 212 minutes after the first call, the deceased, Catherine Hickman, in flat 79 was located. The evidence was given that dramatically described how fire crews were caught by unexpected fire development and multiple requests for rescue. Initial actions by the first arriving crews went to plan. The riser was charged and a bridgehead was established in the lift lobby and stairwell on level 7, 2 floors below the fire floor, and firefighting commenced. As crews were advancing via the common corridor into the flat of origin on the 9th floor, fire was seen to spread externally to involve flat 79 immediately above, and flat 53 and on the 7th and flat 37 on the 5th floor. From about this time, crews began facing unexpected fire development and a large number of rescues across multiple floors. All this was coupled with an unusual layout of the flats and confusing floor and flat numbering. With the increasing appliance attendance, the incident commanders were changing rapidly as more senior officers arrived to take command in accordance with policy and procedure. The first incident commander was in command for 6 minutes, the second for 27 minutes, the third for 23 minutes, the fourth for 4 minutes, the fifth for 57 minutes, and then we went into the sixth one, who was the final incident commander during that part or that phase of the firefighting. In fairness, these times may not be completely accurate, but they're the times that were recorded. An actual handover may have occurred earlier or later than these times, but they serve to illustrate the point. By about 1840, there were over 18 pumps, aerial ladder platforms and fire rescue units, plus many other vehicles on scene. So it's against this background that the coroner made her recommendations to the local fire brigade. I'll discuss how some of the evidence may have led to these recommendations. There were 6 incident commanders during this period of the fire, only serving for brief periods. This raised to the coroner the effectiveness of tying the choice of incident commander to the number of appliances attending an incident. There were times when a make pumps message resulted in an increased response of 2 pumps. As the total number then required the attendance of a more senior officer, a change of incident commander occurred. and the effective use of the relieved incident commander did not always occur.